Your Honor, we had talked about a contempt of court document. We're still looking for that. I have a copy of it here. It's not stamped, but it was attached to the order that you that would not allow Mr. Richard Gill to sit with me. That was part of the first part of that motion, that you disallowed that, and on the second part was the contempt on that document. And we're looking for it. I've got it here, but it hasn't been stamped. It's just my copy. But if I might continue?
Yes, please.
Do you think that it is blatant racism to deny Ezekiel any participation with his uncles, his cousins, his father, his aunts, any of his relations on his Ethiopian African-American side of the family? Isn't that racism?
No.
Why?
Because if those family members were appropriate, they would have access to them like they did back in the day.
Are they inappropriate because they're black?
No.
Are you holding Ezekiel as a kind of hostage for fear that if he is liberated, he will be free to tell what is really going on in your household, wherever that might be?
I have no fears of the truth.
What did you mean when you testified and said that Lynn Gibson was threatened if she testified? What did you mean by that? Threatened by whom?
I believe she was threatened by you. That's why her whole story changed the night before the trial.
You do recall that she will be a rebuttal witness.
Works for me.
How tall is Ezekiel Gibson?
Well, somewhere between 4.5 and 4 and 7 inches. Watch him for 10 minutes, he'll grow.
How much? I wouldn't know that. I haven't had that opportunity. How much does he weigh?
70 pounds.
Are the reports true that he is very, very thin? Is that
No.
true?
No.
As a proponent of healthy eating habits, why does our son Ezekiel Wardell Gibson have so many digestive problems if you are the one who authored Eating My Way to Heaven and claimed to be a nutrition expert?
Well, Dr. Mary Olson, his pediatrician, and Dr. Carlos Rosa, the other doctor that was treating him, are both in agreement that domestic violence has been extremely stressful on him, and that is what's causing his gastric problems.
And what domestic violence would this be?
What we're here discussing year after year after year. Him having to listen to you rail against...
The domestic violence that you have absolutely no police reports about?
Oh, that's not true.
Did you know that it is a fact that sexual molestation of a child can foster digestive, potty, and urinary dysfunctions?
Yes, we discussed that in previous testimony.
So you have considered that this is reality?
Can happen.
Is our son Ezekiel Wardell Gibson a bright child?
He tested 1% in the country for gifted children.
So he's in the top 1% in the country for intellectual brilliance?
I'm not the authority that made that assessment. He is 1% in the country, out-tested all the other children.
And you have documentation of this fact?
Yes.
Did Ezekiel ever write a letter to Barack Obama regarding the Gulf oil spill when he was 5 or maybe 6 years old?
Objection, Your Honor. What's the relevance?
I think it's relevant as to how you're raising your son,
Okay.
whether he writes the president or not.
All right, go ahead.
Under what circumstances are you aware of that he wrote that?
It's a vague memory. I think you helped him write some letter to the president. I don't remember the details.
Does Ezekiel like to dismantle old DVD players to study their computer greenboards to see how they work?
He likes to dismantle everything.
Are you limiting? I'll go back to that question. It occurred to me that since your testimony is that all of his education is 4 hours a day on a computer, and I know, did you not just testify to that? I'm sorry?
The law requires 4.5 hours a day of education, which has to be logged through the computer. Some of it is not done on the computer. The computer program will tell me to take the little scale they sent us and take them over to the sink, and we're going to work on X, Y, or Z for half an hour on how you measure millimeters. So no, his entire education is not online. It is governed online, and he has to put in 4.5 hours of educational work every day. No, it is not all online. The vast majority of it, perhaps, but there are art and science and field trips and all kinds of stuff in that 4.5 hours a day, which the principal of his school got him into.
Would Ezekiel Wardell Gibson be allowed to sit in this courtroom to hear this testimony at the young age of 7?
No, I wouldn't allow it.
I don't think it's a good idea.
Next question, please.
So then, since he's on the computer all the time, I had a computer expert download your YouTube, and it's taken hours and hours and hours. Is that the kind of computer education that he's getting? Witnessing this trial at home on computer? Is that what you're doing?
No, he's not been privy to it.
Really? Aren't you really limiting and secluding and hiding and cloaking Ezekiel to isolate him from other children and adults who might hear Ezekiel talk about abuse or all of his restrictions in this I can only be with my mother and Patrick and Louise Bouchard scenario?
Well,
That was asked and answered at the previous hearing. So next question, please.
What is a play date?
a play date is when two parents make arrangements to get their children together to play, because there might not be a child of the right age in the neighborhood, so you make arrangements and you go somewhere else, and so that children can hang together, children that want to be together.
Are the play dates with boys and girls or just boys?
Ezekiel prefers boys for the most part, but yeah, he's got play dates with girls once in a while.
Does Patrick McEachran play with the boys during these play dates?
Well, if I've got a play date, then I don't need him to give me some relief from parenting. I'm either there or I have another parent to get involved. So
you have parents at these play dates at your residence?
Well, sometimes they're at the residence, sometimes they may be at the playground at McDonald's or at the library. It's wherever it's convenient for us to meet or my transportation allows.
And just who are these other children who are on these play dates? Do you have a list of them, or is it just one or two children, or what?
Well, it's changed over the years depending on who he's running with. Rowan was always a stable since he was so accessible in our life, and he's a month younger than Ezekiel. He had two different friends in first grade that we did play dates with continually, Wyatt and Enzo. And then we started making new relationships that was kindergarten. Then in first grade he had Jack and another boy named Wyatt. And then in second grade we started two new relationships with kids that he met at the very first K-12 outing.
So your testimony today is that he's allowed to have two friends per year?
No, that's not my testimony.
So who are the other children on these play dates?
Children whose parents I've met, children who Ezekiel wanted to get to know better, children that were involved in activities that he was involved in or in school that he was involved in. If Ezekiel said he liked him and wanted to see him again, I went out of my way to make it happen.
What were the circumstances regarding Ezekiel's broken lip?
He banged his head on little 5 or 4-year-old Eddie's head while they were playing in the apartment in Vancouver.
So then why did you tell me it was a cold sore and complain about me giving him an over-the-counter remedy?
There's no truth to that statement that I know.
I believe there's been testimony here that you did not approve of me giving him medication for his lip problem.
No, you're mistaken. I gave testimony that I would not give him the cough medicine that clearly stated on the label it was dangerous for a child his age, and I called the hospital and they said don't do it. Had nothing to do with his lip.
So you're changing your your testimony now that it was some other child that bumped and broke his lip. Who was that child?
It was Eddie, and I have the whole trial on YouTube so we can go back and decide what actually was said. He banged his lip on Eddie's head, as I recall.
Isn't it true that Ezekiel has been slapped for being upset for you not letting his father even talk to him for a year and a half?
It is not true. I've never slapped that child.
Tone it down. Tone it down, both of you.
Has Patrick slapped our son when he demands to see me?
Never.
When Patrick's dark side that you write about comes out, and Eating My Way to Heaven comes out, doesn't he become physically violent? You wrote about this in your book.
20 years ago, we had an episode, and we talked about it at length at this trial.
Has he had any therapy for that?
You'll have to ask him.
I will. Isn't it true that Patrick, when he is in his dark side mode, is physically violent and is abusive to Ezekiel like he was to you and his ex-wife that divorced him?
Now, half of that statement's false, so I don't know how to
Which half would be
respond
false?
to it.
Rephrase the question, please.
Did Patrick McEachran tackle you when you were trying to flee from his violence, when you were driving a truck and grabbed you by the neck and pulled you and caused you to run and have an accident into a tree? Yes or no?
I published it, yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
So he is violent.
17 years ago,
Has he had
we
treatment?
had a row.
Has he had any treatment in the last 17 years?
I just
If you
answered
know.
that.
Okay. Now, you've testified in another court that, and in this one as well, that you've known each other. I'm talking about you and Patrick McEachran. You've been close friends for 19 years. Is that true? Yes or no?
I believe I said 17 or 18, but
And you admitted in this court that 13 of those years you were not intimate, so 7 years you were. I mean, you had a relationship other than
we had a
this.
relationship for 3 years. We've been friends and business associates ever since.
When did you discover that Patrick McEachran was abusing my son Ezekiel?
He's never abused Ezekiel.
When did you discover that Patrick McEachran was sexually abusing our son Ezekiel?
It has never happened.
When you discovered that Patrick was abusing Ezekiel, you fled from your home with him and Louise Broussard, ultimately moving as far as Tucson, Arizona to escape his violence. Is that not true?
No, it's not true. I fled to escape your violence.
Well, it appears to me that you had been living with Patrick and Louise Broussard and Ezekiel in Louise's home, and you fled that situation, ultimately landing in Tucson, Arizona. Is that not true?
No, it is not true. I was living with you in Vancouver when it happened.
So what were the circumstances that propelled you to leave, if that's the right word, a living relationship with Louise Broussard, Patrick McEachran, and Ezekiel before you fled to the sanctity of my house? Safety of my house, excuse me.
We discussed this at length, but I will start over. I was living at Louise's with Patrick, Ezekiel, Louise, and you had every other weekend visitations, which were going horribly for Ezekiel. Then, in the course of one of your weekend visitations, a storm hit, and there was no way to move him back from Vancouver to Portland, so I decided to go stay with you because I wanted to be there with Ezekiel. During the course of that stay, I witnessed you do at least one thing, but numerous, that I felt was way off. And since the court kept insisting that Ezekiel spend every other weekend with you, I moved back in because better we deal with you together than him on his own.
So your motive for leaving Patrick and Louise the first time had nothing to do with the sexual abuse of Ezekiel Wardell Gibson by Patrick McEachran in Louise Broussard's home. with you as a
You can
witness.
say it as often as you like. It didn't happen, and you have no proof and no agency that wants to back you up on it.
Next question, please.
Isn't it true that you fled to avoid prosecution knowing that there was criminal behavior going on between Patrick, you, Louise, and Ezekiel?
No.
You knew that Ezekiel Wardell Gibson, my son, was being sexually abused in Tucson, Arizona, and you did nothing about it, correct?
No. He was never sexually abused by anyone.
So when he said that those people hurt him and started crying, what was he crying about? What did he mean by that?
We've already discussed this. Apparently, your recollection is unclear, but what he was discussing was the boys that bullied him in the shelter.
And so now you've moved him back with Patrick and you refuse to do anything about the current molestation, correct?
There is no sexual abuse of Ezekiel happening, nor there ever has.
Isn't it true that you've continued to allow the sexual abuse of Ezekiel Gibson for the last 4 years and have done nothing about it?
It has
Move
never
on, Mr.
happened.
Gibson. Would you please move on, please?
Why wasn't I included in the parenting class and parenting plan for family counseling that you lied to counselors and all the staff about Ezekiel to keep me away from my son? The question, let me rephrase the question.
Yeah.
Why wasn't I included, since you were in such family counseling, why wasn't I included in that counseling? I am his father.
Actually, you've been included a number of times. You were supposed to take all the parenting classes with me and the team of midwives. You chose not to show up. Then I'm not through with my testimony.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Gibson, do not interrupt any more while she's giving her testimony, please. Do not interrupt any more. Continue.
I got us a counselor, a family counselor, a black man with a PhD in interracial relationships, and arranged to have him work with us for $100 an hour. That was on me. And after 7 sessions of you talking about my stuff and me talking about my stuff and you copying to nothing, he told me it was a waste of money. So you were included.
How old was Ezekiel at that time?
She was pregnant.
Yeah, this was before we even got to birth.
I'm talking about, Miss Martin, the counseling sessions that Louise Broussard testified to us in $400,000 grant to be able to counsel Ezekiel in a family kind of planning kind of way. Why, as his father, since it's about counseling for Ezekiel in a family situation, why was I excluded?
You've been excluded from everything because of your behaviors.
Next question. Why did you make the school, Bachman Creek School, an accessory to your criminal activity by denying and interfering with principals, teachers, counselors, and psychologists to have anything to do with Ezekiel as you were camped out there 4 days a week?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Would you ask it again?
Why did she make Bachman School an accessory to criminal activity when she deliberately tried to interfere with an investigation by Child Protective Services in Oregon when they called the school to see if there was any malfeasance going on?
Okay, that's called a compound question.
Okay.
One question at a time, please. One statement of fact.
What was your motive in keeping Child Protective Services? What was your motive in trying to keep me from having anything to do with the faculty, including teachers, principals, counselors at Beckman School?
Nobody ever kept you from doing anything. You just didn't choose to participate.
Did you not have a restraining order that kept me from the school?
I did.
So then how was I to participate if I was restrained from going on the school grounds?
You'll have to discuss that with Judge Ruley, who signed the restraining order.
I'm asking you.
Phrase the question again, please.
Well, you just said that I didn't want to participate in the counseling, yet But you just testified that you kept me from going to the school to be able to be involved with Ezekiel in any kind of way with teachers, educators, psychologists, and others at that school because you deliberately had a restraining order against me to keep me from having anything to do with my child's education. Isn't that true?
The last 14 months, you've been restrained. Previous to that, you had every right to show up there and interact with his teachers, didn't choose to. And the last 14 months, you still had the right to call the principal, call the psychologist, call the secretary, call his teacher, ask about his welfare. You didn't choose to do that either.
No, the restraining order prohibited me from doing that. Would you like to see the restraining order?
It didn't prohibit you from making phone calls. It prohibited you from going on the property. And the year before that, there was no restraining order, and you didn't choose to be involved.
That's not true. There was a restraining order. Ezekiel, isn't it true that Ezekiel would have told other children and adults what was going on in his life if he was allowed to have contact with other children at his school, and you took him away from that?
Currently, he's living with 60 adults and children, and has been for weeks, where he could talk to anybody he wants to all day long, and he is not.
So you're advocating his current situation as a normal situation for him?
It is for him. We've had to flee your madness for his whole life, starting in the womb.
My madness? When you were sexually abused by your father, didn't you ask for help from his church's pastor?
I did.
Wasn't your father a deacon in his church in Houston, Texas?
Well, the pastor I asked for help was in New York, but yes, he was a deacon in Houston.
Wasn't he also a powerful oil executive at the time?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever hear anything simulating, "I'm sorry," from your father for his abuse, sexual abuse on you?
I didn't give him a chance. I disowned him.
Have you ever received any counseling for the abuse you suffered as a child by your father?
Lots. By choice.
What kind of counseling?
Sought it out myself.
What sort of counseling?
All kinds of counseling. In my early 20s, I felt I was going through what I considered a nervous breakdown. I got on the phone, asked for help, I got it. I joined incest groups and worked with the counselors that showed up there to help with these groups. I have sought out ways to improve my life and to diminish the harm that was done to me my entire life.
Have you received counseling as an adult for his abuse or Patrick's abuse? You testified a few minutes ago that he got you in a headlock and caused you to run into a tree.
Nothing compared to what I've been through with you, but yes, I have.
Really? Have I ever been physically violent to you?
The
You're
one
under oath?
incident you
You're under
can't
oath?
get off of, yes.
Physically?
18 years ago, whatever the story was written, that is true.
In an interview with Terry Vetter, you said that I'd never laid my hands on you, which is true.
You? Who are we talking about?
I'm talking about you. You testified to Terry Vetter that I had never laid hands on you. It's in the court records, so now you're saying that I have, which is true. Which is it?
Oh, whether you laid a hand on me and whether you assaulted me are two different things.
Really? Did Louise Broussard abuse you as well as public officials for Washington County?
Abuse me?
Yes.
Not to my knowledge.
Who else abused you in Washington County when you were seeking help for the real abuse you suffered by Patrick McEachran?
I never suffered what... I don't know what you're talking
Well,
about.
you said that he had a dark side. You said that there's several times that you had to flee to different shelters. You said that you had to flee to farms and vacant houses.
Okay, one question at a time, please.
My question is, for all of this abuse that he put on you, the physical abuse, when he goes into his dark side mode and becomes physically violent, did you seek counseling for his abuse?
No.
So you do admit he abused you.
I admit to the episode I wrote about in my book, and I admitted to 17 years of working through issues with him because he can change. He will cop to something, and he will change his behavior. It's not been my experience with you, ever.
So you've never really got any professional mental health or any other kind of counseling for the abuse of Patrick on you?
For the one rough and tumble episode I wrote about, no, I didn't.
No,
I
you wrote
worked
about-
through it with him, and I moved on.
Isn't it true that you write about not one, but several episodes of his physical violence against you?
It's not my recollection.
It's in your book.
I remember him tackling me and writing about that incident when we were single adults. Having you tackle me with a baby in my womb was way more devastating.
That's not true, Your Honor. So when Patrick slapped Ezekiel because he wanted to see his father, you knew Ezekiel was being abused and you elected to do nothing?
Patrick's never slapped
Excuse
Ezekiel.
me, you can't testify to facts that aren't in evidence. Where is the evidence that Patrick slapped
A
Ezekiel?
broken lip. And when I was...
Hang on, Mr. Gibson. Do not testify about facts that are not in evidence, okay? That is not a fact in evidence. There's nothing in this court record that says Patrick McAhern slapped Ezekiel.
You
on the
allowed
lip.
testimony...
Okay, I'm just telling you, when you ask a question, do not testify to facts that are not in evidence, that did not come from the witness.
May I remind the court
Next question, please. Next question.
that you allowed evidence...
Next question,
Objection,
please.
Your Honor.
Who is Don Hunt?
He's my webmaster of 6 or 7 years.
Technical webmaster.
That's what they are. Yeah, he's an IT specialist.
What does webmaster mean?
He takes care of my website where I promote and sell my book and my projects, etc.
And he has done significant work for you, like you just said. He has.
Very significant.
And Don Hunt was on your witness list, correct?
I believe so.
Did he sodomize Ezekiel in Tucson, Arizona?
No.
So then, when Ezekiel said, they hurt me in Arizona, was he referring to Don Hunt?
He was referring to the two bullies we've talked about over and over and over at the shelter in Arizona.
Why did Ezekiel act so shy, reclusive, and timid after returning from Tucson, Arizona?
Ezekiel's still shy. I have to initiate relationships for him, and then he's good to go. But his initial contact with just about anyone is shy and unsure until he decides who they are, and then he's good to go.
Based on the 2 or 3 people a year that you let him see in this controlled environment that you have him in?
I've answered it over and over.
So, you just now testified that he was abused in shelters, yet you continue to take him to shelters based on some fantasy about a black man on the earth being able to give you fear of some kind. I mean, if he's being abused in shelters, why do you continue to take him to shelter after shelter? That's abusive, isn't it?
Not as abusive as you are.
You have yet to prove any abuse here, young lady. So when Ezekiel, when your testimony was that he was being abused in shelters, what kind of abuse are you talking about?
The same
Sexual
kind
abuse?
he was dealing with on the playground at school that millions of children are dealing with. Little boys or little girls,
We're not
not
talking
able.
about
I
millions
haven't
of
finished
sisters.
my
Gibson,
statement.
Tone it down, Miss Martin. Tone it down. Continue.
Same kind of abuse that children are dealing with in schools all over the country, being bullied by other children. But in a shelter, the rules can be very confining. One parent is not allowed to admonish another parent's child, so you have to stand by and watch in horror till a staff member comes to take care of it. And that's why I left the shelter in Arizona where he was being bullied, because there was no way I could help him deal with that situation in an appropriate way.
So based on your testimony today, you think that abuse, the sexual abuse of Ezekiel, is normal based on your own sexual abuse.
There's no evidence that Ezekiel was sexually abused. Keep your questions confined to the evidence and record. You cannot testify, Mr. Gibson.
Have you ever heard of the North America Men Boys Love Association?
No, I haven't.
Have you been to their website?
I have no idea what you're speaking of.
Do you believe that grown men and young boys playing naked games together is normal?
No, I think it's inappropriate.
Did you tell Patrick that when he was playing Ezekiel and Rowan naked on the trampoline?
No.
Why didn't you?
It was summer. Two little 5-year-old boys stripped down on the trampoline while we were playing with the hose. It seemed natural to them. We were all concerned about it because of garbage like this, and so we put an end to it.
So is that why Rowan's grandmother, Louise Broussard, admonished Patrick by his own testimony that it was inappropriate for him to be playing naked water games with little boys?
Well, first of all, the little boys were naked, not Mr. McEachern. Secondly, yes, Miss Bouchard was taking care of her grandson, and she did not feel that the child's mother would be comfortable with it. So she said, I'm not comfortable with this. We weren't either. So we had the children put their underwear back on.
Mm. So you're testifying now that you're complicit with Patrick in playing games with naked little boys until Miss Bouchard, who testified that it was right before this trial, before she ever heard of anything about any malfeasance with naked little boys.
It was before this trial that she heard you were accusing her of rolling around in the bed with naked little boys. People handling...
Wait for next question.
Okay.
Have you followed any of the Penn State sexual abuse trial, or sexual abuse case?
I've been very busy advocating for my son in this case.
So the answer is no?
No.
Thank you.
I have no idea what's going on there.
So you're not aware of the grand jury indictment of over 40 sexual
Answer
abuse
was
charges?
no. Continue. Next question.
I have no clue.
Ezekiel Wardell Gibson plays basketball.
Is there a question there?
Does Ezekiel Wardell Gibson play basketball?
Yes, he does.
And do you recall him being very, very happy that he beat his father, who played at a semi-professional level, 18 games in a row? You remember that?
I do remember.
Was Patrick McEachern Ezekiel's basketball coach?
He did sign up to coach the Mini Hoopers.
And is that a program at Beckman School or away?
Alton Parks and Recreation.
Alton Parks and...
You were welcome to go there and participate as well.
No, I was under restraining order.
Not then.
Was the game Kilpatrick played at this location?
Oh, the game Kilpatrick is played everywhere. Little boys love to play with guns and clubs and yep, they love to play Kilpatrick.
Do the little boys shower after playing basketball in the locker room?
No.
Were any of these boys invited for home play dates with Patrick?
Just the ones that we were already involved with.
As the basketball coach on these home play dates, did any of the kids, the little boys, play on the trampoline?
No, I don't know really what you're talking about.
Well, I'm trying to find out if they were naked on the trampoline too.
No.
So the little boys weren't naked then, is your testimony?
No, the incident of Rowan and Ezekiel getting naked on the trampoline has been discussed over and over. The
Okay,
adults
let's move
involved were
on, please.
uncomfortable.
Enough.
Didn't
Next
happen.
question.
So I'm just curious, is this why you've worked tirelessly and vigorously with isolation tactics against educational professionals to keep Ezekiel from having contact with me or anyone else concerning his education well-being for fear of the real truth about what's going on in your home being discovered?
Asked and answered at the last hearing date. Move on, please.
Haven't you refused to seek medical attention for our son Ezekiel because of the sexual abuse by Patrick would have been discovered? Is that what not You can answer that question.
He's been to see Dr. Mary Olson twice since you alleged all this was happening. So, no, that's not true.
Since I alleged this, the last 6 months or the last 3 years?
It's only been the last 6 months. Directly after you being blown out of our home, I got some emails from you that didn't mention any of this. Just your Mercedes and your stuff and you being blown out of my company. No mention of sexual abuse until it was time to spin a tale for your criminal trial.
Was Ezekiel required to take a physical at Beckman School?
Not that I know of.
Was Ezekiel required to have shots?
Not if I signed the paperwork saying I object to such, which I did. It's my right, and it's legal.
What about Ezekiel's rights to be free from disease?
He does not want any needles put in his arm.
He's 7. He doesn't make that decision.
I made that decision,
That's
legally.
my point. Why would you make a decision to keep him from being inoculated with all kinds of diseases everywhere?
Because the evidence is showing that those inoculations are causing autism and a whole variety of other
Do
problems
you have
that are
any evidence
unnecessary.
of this evidence?
I don't have to defend my right. I legally had the right to make that decision. I made it. I filled out the appropriate paperwork. Done.
Next question, please. Move on.
So you're saying that a medical doctor examined Ezekiel,
Yes, Dr. Mary Olson, his pediatrician.
his pediatrician, that you've gotten in the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So for 6.5 or 7 years, really, he's had no medical doctor.
That's not true. We discussed this, but we'll go over it again. He's been to an ER twice, and I think we're all in agreement. They employ doctors there. You were there one time. You drove us to the ER. He has seen...
Yes, when he fell in the playground and broke his head
So
open.
he's been to see doctors in a hospital setting twice. He has had a pediatrician, and he was seeing Dr. Rosa, but you were attacking him so hard in court that I went looking for a pediatrician so that I didn't have to defend his very...
Non-degrees?
He is a naturopathic doctor. He is well-degreed. And you loved him when you saw him.
Next question.
Patrick was dismissed from Albertina Kerr School for Troubled Children. Do you know the reason why?
Yes, they sold the 3 acres that our garden project was on, and they were going to plow it down for a parking lot, so we were asked to move on.
It wasn't because of walking naked in Labyrinth Gardens that was
Yeah, no. Very powerful
So,
nonprofit.
did any of those children walk through the gardens naked with you and Patrick?
No, they were under pretty much house arrest.
Or protection
Yes,
from,
parents like you.
like me?
Keep the personal comments to yourself. Move on, please.
Have you, Patrick, Louise Broussard, Stacy Cohen, Don Hunt, and others participated in naked coming out ceremonies with other at-risk children like you did with the autistic child?
Actually, the autistic person was 21 when we did that on his birthday, and it was his choice. But no, I have never participated in that activity with anyone else.
And what about during these activities with your fireside rituals?
I have no clue what you're talking about.
Really? In these labyrinth gardens, are there dry saunas that you use in these rituals that you have?
Not in any of the ones I've built.
Really? Isn't it common to sweat naked in these hot saunas?
I don't know what is common or what is legal, but Ezekiel is too young to be in a sauna, so whatever might happen in a sauna has nothing to do with him.
Isn't it true that there was a sauna in your house, in your garage, that had stereo and video? It was a hot sauna. And isn't it true that Ezekiel participated in that one?
That was called a chi builder. It was a $30,000 machine.
Sauna?
Not really.
What do you mean, not
It had
really?
infrared heat in it.
Oh, so
but
it was a hot
nobody
sauna.
got in there naked. It had a trampoline, and it was in the garage for about 2 weeks. And as I recall, you got to experience it as well.
So, do men who love boys like Patrick testify that he does bathe nude in these saunas with children?
No.
Do the rituals continue while walking the labyrinths naked?
I have no idea what rituals you're talking about.
Well, you testified that you and an autistic child and Patrick walked naked through a labyrinth that the judge allowed to come in as evidence, the labyrinth. And I'm asking you, in these, when these children are over and you have these labyrinths and you have these hot saunas, do the children participate along with the fireside rituals that I've witnessed at your house?
You haven't witnessed any fireside rituals at my home, and no, we don't have
What do you
children.
call the chanting as you walk through the labyrinths if it's not a ritual?
I don't chant when I walk through the labyrinth. I listen to the birds. It happens to be a bird sanctuary.
The birds chant.
Pretty much. But I'd chant if I felt moved to.
You also testified, or you in your book, you write about losing a child after being roughhoused by Portland police officers. Do you remember reading about that?
I don't recall saying I was roughhoused. I was dehydrated, and I lost a pregnancy after that experience. I never accused them of roughhousing me.
You deliberately, when you say that you are a adrenaline junkie, put yourself in positions to be manhandled by police knowing you were pregnant?
I didn't know I was pregnant at the time.
You didn't know you were pregnant at the time?
Did not.
I see. Wasn't the event that you were trying to gain attention to had to do with abused children, and you got yourself in a situation while trying to gain attention about abused children, you ultimately abused your own child by killing it, by putting yourself in a dangerous situation where police could beat you up?
That's quite the question. I'm just going to say no.
But you did lose the baby.
I was about 8 weeks along, and I had a miscarriage, yes.
So these rituals in these labyrinth gardens have nothing to do with becoming pregnant.
No. I don't know what the Christian
Okay,
church
the
is
answer is
using.
no. Thank you. Next question.
So, am I not getting something? But didn't you say that you were walking naked through the labyrinths and then you became pregnant? Whose child was it? Was it the autistic child's or Patrick's?
Well, the way you weave things together that are like 10 years apart is very interesting, but the incident had nothing to do with the other. I did what Lowell wanted to do for his 21st birthday, as we've discussed over and over and over. It was very uncomfortable, but it had nothing to do with
testified to
the
last
other.
time. I don't need to hear it again.
When is Ezekiel's birthday?
March 9th,
And how old will he be?
8.
Is there anything associated with labyrinths and the 8th birthday of a child in these rituals in these labyrinth gardens? Yes or no?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Really? Who or what is a minotaur?
I have no idea. It sounds like something out of the movie Avatar, but I do not know what a minotaur is.
What did you mean by your email, fire, fire, Christians on fire?
No. It said liar,
Excuse me, you're right.
Christians.
Liar, liar, Christians on fire.
I felt you and some of your witnesses have been untruthful in this proceeding.
Isn't it true that you hate Christians because your father was a deacon and molested you and caused you to be pregnant? He performed an abortion on you at age 12 that you write about in your book?
Not even close. As a matter of fact, Ezekiel has attended a Christian church since you've been removed.
That was not my question.
No, it's not true.
It's not true. So there is no ritual in labyrinth gardens involving children when they approach or when they become 8 years old.
Not to my knowledge.
You build labyrinth gardens all over the place, correct?
Hey, Mr. Gibson, you're continuing to testify about facts that are not in evidence. So let's focus on what you
Your
know
Honor,
to be a verity and not what you want her to say.
Okay, but Your
Okay,
Honor.
your questions are out of line, sir. Next question, please.
Your Honor, I objected to the Labyrinth Gardens coming in because of the religious circumstances of them. You overruled me and allowed them to come in. It's only fair that I question about what goes on in these labyrinths.
And you have done so for the last 10 minutes, so go on, please.
Okay? So you're denying then that these rituals are part of a religion?
I'm denying that I participate in rituals.
Do you think that you would benefit from psychiatric professional counseling as Dr. Kirk Johnson recommended?
I don't even want to comment on Dr.
Yes or no?
Johnson's testimony. I would definitely benefit from counseling.
Do you believe Ezekiel could benefit from counseling?
Absolutely.
If you lose custody, you have threatened to flee. Is that your intention with Ezekiel?
Where did I say that?
I have an email that says that.
Where?
I have it. I'm asking you, if the judge rules against you and you lose custody, is it your intent to flee with Ezekiel to parts unknown?
No.
Good. Do you believe that you negatively affected the mental health of our son Ezekiel by these constant movings and places and things that you're doing?
No, I think I saved him.
Do you think that keeping him, I already asked that question. So you have intentionally inflicted harm on our son by isolating him from others?
No.
Are you in fear of Patrick McEachran, Don Hunt, Louise Broussard, or Stacy Cohen?
No.
Are you being abused by any of them now?
No.
Are you now willing to confess to being engaged in abuse of our son Ezekiel Wardell Gibson with Patrick McEachran?
Never.
Will you seek help and testify against the sexual mental health molestation to earn supervised visitation of Ezekiel while you are mentally rehabilitated?
I'm
Rephrase that,
confused.
please.
Well, the question is simply
What is
this.
the question,
The
please?
question is, are you willing to confess to the abuse of Ezekiel
No.
by you, Patrick, and Louise Broussard? And if so,
Okay, that's the question. Are you willing to confess to the abuse of Ezekiel by you, Patrick, and Louise?
There's been no abuse. I'm not
Answer is what?
confessing. No.
Okay, what's the second part of the question?
well, if that would be a condition of...
The answer was no. What's the second part of the
Okay,
question?
the
if you
second
have
part of the question is, would you testify against any sexual molestation if it became discovered by Child Protective Services and DHS that this is in fact is what's going on?
I would testify to the truth of what I know about Ezekiel's relationship with anyone they wanted to know about.
Next question.
Would you agree that you have been in contempt of this court and these proceedings and proceedings in Oregon over the last 5 years, over and over again, by your lies?
No.
Who has Ezekiel right now?
A trusted adult.
Who has Ezekiel right now?
Asked and answered. Next question.
What is the name of the person that has Ezekiel right now?
I'm not sharing that with you.
Next question.
Where are all of Ezekiel's things, toys, possessions, collections, sporting equipment, clothes, electronic equipment, and all that? Is it with you at the shelter?
What he needs on a daily basis is with me. The rest is in storage, because until this matter is settled and I'm free to work where the work is, I had to put everything in storage, because the job offers I have right now are not in the counties I am bound to because of this. So I'm just hanging, waiting for this to be over so I know where I am able
So is
to
your
work.
intention then, by your question, answer your question, to flee with Ezekiel after this court proceeding?
My intention is to be released to work where work is available for me so I can support my child, since I'm not getting the child support I need.
That's not true. I think I'm finished with the question of this witness, Your Honor.
Okay, anything you'd like to respond to, Ms. Martin, that you haven't already?
Yes, Your Honor. If it's appropriate, I would like to respond to what has gone on in the last month and the allegations he made. I would like to share testimony of what actually has transpired with me and law enforcement agents in the last 26 days.
Go ahead.
I didn't understand why Mr. Gibson was allowed to harass and threaten me in a courthouse when I had a restraining order.
Objection, Your Honor. We've already covered this. You yourself said so.
Overruled.
So it dawned on me that the reason that was allowed was because in order to do anything, you have to file something. So I set out to file a police report. And I called the Vancouver police and they said, you never had a restraining order. Didn't happen. It's not in the computer. Never happened. Really? Okay. I'm pretty sure it happened. I think Judge really believes it happened. No, I'm sorry, lady, never happened. So I walked in to the Portland Police Department and said, I want to file a report. I have a restraining order. It was violated. No, you don't. Never happened. Never in the computer. Didn't happen. Okay. So I walked over to the FBI building and sat down with two FBI agents and said, I think there's something way off with my case, and I want to file a police report because I don't feel safe, and I don't know when we're going to end all this. They told me, the Portland FBI told me, if indeed I had a hard copy of a restraining order that had a seal and a signature, I could walk it into the Vancouver Police Department, they would take my report. Once I got my safety needs met, if I still felt that there was corruption in my case, I should meet with the Vancouver FBI. They gave me the number. So I drove up to the Vancouver Police Department the next day, and I met Officer Jim Watson. I told him what had been going on, and I showed him the paperwork that indeed had a stamp and your signature on it, and he said, good news, bad news, Miss Martin. You do have a valid restraining order, but I can't take your report because it ran out October 15th, 2011. Okay. So I grabbed a legal packet for domestic violence that was sitting in the lobby of the police station, and I left. Upon reading it, it says that a restraining order is good for a year or until your case is finished or a new order is put in place. As far as I understood, my case wasn't finished. I had tried to bring some contempt motions and some other actions before the restraining order ran out. You didn't choose to respond in a legal way. So as far as I understood, my restraining order was still in place. And it's in this document, it said, it will be in place until the case is over. So I called Officer Jim Watson back and said, well, your own legalese says even if it's not in the computer, and I have a hard copy, it's still good. It says so right here. And he said, well, you never had it now. Day 2, the same officer's saying, well, you didn't have a restraining order. It ran out October 15th, 2010. I said, no, it didn't. Judge Ruley upheld it. He signed it. He stamped it. It's been in place for 14 months. We've discussed it in court. I don't think any of us are confused on that. Are you now changing your testimony, Officer Watson, that you didn't look at my paperwork yesterday and did not affirm that I had a legal restraining order? And he said, bring it back. So I made another trip to Vancouver. I walk in. Everyone knows who I am. Oh, just a minute. Let us get Officer Watson for you. 5 minutes later, I'm told Officer Watson has left for the day, and now I'm starting all over with Officer Stevens. Officer Stevens finally agrees to take my police report, but he continues to tell me that since it's not in the computer, I don't have a valid restraining order. I show him the packet that I picked up in their lobby. It says right here, sir. It doesn't have to be both. It's either I have the document or it's in the computer. So he tells me that that packet isn't necessarily legal. It's just what it is. Okay. But he takes my police report and gives me a case number. and now it's turned over to the domestic violence team. Eventually, I end up talking to the prosecuting attorney for the domestic violence team, who also tells me I do not have a legal restraining order. First, he tells me that it ran out October 15th, and I show him the document that the police made me sign for. Officer Stevens made me sign, that he gave me one of these legal packets that he had already told me was no good. In that packet, it says that, A, that the restraining order is good if you have it on you or it's in the computer, not either or, but not both, but either or, and B, that it is good until the completion of the case or another court order, which hasn't happened. And so he says, well, yours ran out October 15th. I said, I don't believe so. It says right here. And then he says, well, the officer said your return of service was no good. Well, wait a minute. 5 minutes ago I had a legal restraining order. Now you're saying I never had a legal one because the return of service was no good. So, yes, I've had a number of discussions with law enforcement. Then I sat down with Sergeant Schenecker, who runs the security for this entire building, because I had spent 8 days trying to chase the report that Deputy Bain, I thought, would have made on November 9th about what happened in the hallway. There was no report. 8 days later, Deputy Bain called me back and said, oh, witnesses are harassed and threatened in the courthouse every day. Every day this happens, people on the sidewalk like Mr. Gill was, so we don't write reports. Okay. Well, there was another deputy involved. And at the end of the trial, after Judge Ruley left the room, I went and got another deputy to escort me back to the courtroom because I was being harassed by Mr. Gibson and his group. Apparently, he didn't file a report. I need an affidavit from him. Sergeant Schenecker said his name was Deputy Goudon, told me to contact him on Monday, get an affidavit from him. On Monday, I came to see Deputy Goudon, sitting right there in the hallway, and he said, oh, no, it wasn't me. I said, yeah, I think it was you. Oh, okay, that's right. Well, I sat here in my chair, and then you walked in the courtroom. No, you walked me to the courtroom, and as you might recall, we had a conversation about courtrooms being open past 5, and, oh, yeah, that was me, but I didn't see anything, I don't know anything, and he wouldn't sign an affidavit or write up anything. So I had 4 good experiences with the Portland police. They came looking for me after I sent some faxes about what I consider to be either corruption or ineptitude in this case. And they found me, and they supported me in the fact that something was way off here. And then after you called for your welfare check that night, and they went and rousted him out of bed, knocking on his window at 11:30 at night saying you've been accused of sexual abuse, and he stepped out, and he answered their questions, told them what was going on to their satisfaction.
Who's he?
I'm sorry?
Who's he that you're referencing?
Mr. McEachern.
Patrick McEachern?
The Portland police rousted him out of bed at 11:30 and said...
Okay, for the record, identify him by name.
Okay, yes, Your Honor. The Portland police rousted Patrick McEachern out of bed at 11:30 at night, pounding on the window where he was sleeping, and they listened to his story. They had heard your story, and they told Mr. McEachern that you couldn't answer their questions, your story didn't hold up, they thought you were agitated.
Overruled.
And they left me a message. He told them where I was, the shelter that they're well aware of, and they left me a message saying, we've met with Mr. McEachern, it was a welfare check, you should probably hire an attorney, and we know where you are, and here's the case number.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
You keep making reference to the order that was entered on October of 2010, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
It says that this order shall expire.
The difficulty that law enforcement was having with the order, Your Honor, is that the restraining order, of course, says it runs out in a year, although this law packet says it doesn't. But on the parenting page, you had written, will stand until further order of this court. So they didn't know if it meant the restraining order or just the parenting part. But the law indicates that the restraining order stands until the case is over. At least the law packet that the police are giving out.
Not the same packet they used in 2010?
That's where I got it, was the police lobby 3 weeks ago.
Did you complete a law enforcement information sheet and provide it with this order so that they could enter it into their law enforcement?
I sure did,
And was it on record also?
as far as I know.
Okay, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
You mentioned that Mr. Gibson hadn't paid child support, and he said that he had. What's the status of the child support issue?
Well, as you recall, I filed for my 4th contempt against him, and on March 24th, he was to bring me a check for he owed $9,000 in the contempt that you
Yes.
put on the record. He was to bring a check for $4,500, and then I said, well, what about the other $4,500? You said we're not done yet. But on the 24th of March, the car wouldn't start. I could not get here. I called your chambers, said, take public transportation. I'm on my way, whatever.
Bottom line, you received $4,500.
I got $4,500. We've never discussed the other $4,500. And that contempt was through through November of 2010. He hasn't paid anything for December of 2010
Okay,
or
hang on
a
a
dime
minute.
in 2011. And the
So
number is...
$9,000 represented child support owing through November of 2010.
Yes, Your Honor.
Accurate?
Yes,
No.
Your Honor. That was what the contempt filing was for.
And when I was,
One moment, please. And you have not received anything from him since March?
No, I haven't. Yes, I haven't received anything for December of 2011 or any of 2010 or any of 2011. All I got was half of the contempt for.
So other than the $4,500, you have not received any money from Mr. Gibson
No, sir.
in any shape, form whatsoever?
No,
Okay. And how much is owing?
including the 45.
Yes.
$12,060.
$12,060,
Your Honor,
which includes the $4,500 that wasn't paid as part of the $9,000 judgment.
That's correct.
Your Honor, my record...
One moment, please. One moment. You'll have your opportunity. I need to get the facts down. What's the date of the order?
The order to disperse funds,
The one before that.
324, order on hearing contempt, page 158.
158.
Yes, Your Honor. There's another one that's 155 from February.
155.
It's the February 17th order on contempt.
Thank you.
May I get some more water while you're...
Go ahead. Okay, so where's the order of contempt? It's the presentation on March 24th.
158 is the order on hearing contempt review.
March 24th.
Yes, Your Honor. Denies dispersal.
I don't see the order, do you?
That found him in contempt for failed to pay.
Yeah, the order itself.
Page 155 says
That's
that
an
Ms.
NCR,
Martin
isn't
was
it?
to prepare an order on show cause contempt
Mm-hmm.
and present sent it to the court on 3/24.
But I don't see one.
I don't see. Go back in and look.
May I give you my recollection of that?
One moment, please.
Okay, you set it over to the March 31st date. Doesn't show that as happening. Is where it says he put money in the clerk's register and he will disperse. I don't show when the order was done.
I prepared an order, Your Honor. I did not file it because we hadn't finished discussing the other 4,500, and I didn't want to be locked into an order that wasn't complete.
Okay, Mr. Gibson?
Yes, my recollection, if you recall, Your Honor, when I appeared in court as ordered by the court for a cashier's check for $4,500, and at that time, Miss Martin failed to show up because of some, she said, car problem. And so then what you were going to do is set the hearing a week later. And when I asked if I could speak, you told me no, she wasn't here. And then you proceeded to write out this order, having the sheriff in the court and all that. And then when I said, well, you know, I have a cashier's check for $4,500, and you're amazed that I had it, you took it, and said, well, that changes everything. And my recollection is the other $4,500, because she was not here so that we could deal with the second $4,500, it was gone. You said that was it. She didn't appear. So my recollection is that $4,500
That's
was
a
gone.
gift to Mr. Gibson?
That was my recollection.
No, sir.
No?
That's not accurate. It
It
wasn't
better not
dealt. Excuse me.
Sorry.
It wasn't dealt with that day because she wasn't there. So there was no further
And it
action
hasn't been
taken
dealt
by
with.
me because she wasn't there to present a case to argue what should be done with the rest of the $4,500.
Well, you said it more eloquently than I could.
Okay. All right. So there's still monies owing on the prior contempt order. The $4,500 was almost half of what was owing at the time. And I feel if Mr. Gibson brought payment for half of that at the time, that he could avoid going to custody, which he did, but that still didn't erase the balance of $9,072 that was owing.
Then, Your Honor, when I started getting mail from the Oregon for child support, it looks like that one did not include the $4,500 at all, or any other payments that I had ever made. It looked like she was double dipping. She's trying to get child support from the state of Washington and the state of Oregon.
What proof do you have that you've paid anything other than the $4,500 that you paid a year ago?
Oh, my goodness. There's receipts that I have and had where I gave her money when you ordered her to...
Okay, you need to work through those during the lunch hour because there's now a claim for $12,000. So if you have receipts that shows that you've paid your child support obligation, you need to provide those. And
Well, Your Honor, I didn't know who to pay it to, the state of Oregon or the state of Washington. As you just said yourself, you had not given another...
did you pay it to anyone?
No, because who am I supposed to pay?
I had no
Oregon or
trouble getting
Washington?
Mr. Tuttle on the phone.
Stop.
My
Okay, the question is, Mr. Gibson, show me a receipt that you have paid towards your support obligation since the last time we were in court on the contempt proceeding. That's
No,
all.
that's not what you said. You said, did I have any receipts of any child support that I'd paid? And I said,
Right.
yeah, I had.
Okay, if you have those receipts, fine.
Okay.
I'll consider them as credit on the amount that she's claiming that's owed.
Okay, I have them. I've got to find them.
And who did you make those payments to?
Her, directly.
This year?
Nope. We'll let him gather the receipts, and then we'll deal with it this afternoon.
I'm referring to payments that I made directly to her.
If you have a receipt that it's acknowledged and signed by her, then I'll
I
consider it.
do, but we're talking some previous child support. I don't think we're talking about the $4,500 that we're talking about here, or thereafter.
Previous doesn't matter. It's
Okay, well, then that's what I have receipts for.
Okay, so there's
I haven't
nothing
seen
since
Ezekiel
the
in
payment of the
15 months.
$4,500, correct?
I'm sorry?
There has been no payments made since the $4,500.
No, because it was my understanding that because she didn't show up and file whatever she needed to file, that when I paid you the $4,500 for her, my recollection was that because she wasn't here and didn't file it, that was it.
Okay. All right. How did you calculate the amount owing, Ms. Gibson, Ms. Martin?
Well, because the child support order is still in place that says he pays $540 a month, and I did the math. There was December of 2010, and now there are 12 months in 2011. That's 13
You
months
might
at
recall
$540
that during this,
Stop.
plus $4,500.
Mr. Gibson,
yes, sir.
I might recall what?
That during this time of this $4,500, that when I was living, part of this is when I was living for them a month at Miss Martin's with all of my things, all of my employment information, and all of my tools of my trade, she had under control of her. You then wrote an order and talked to her on the phone, giving me time to get my things out of there so I could work and make money. So this is during the time when that she's alleging I owe this money, is the time when she had really in control of all of my working things. I was not able, with one pair of clothes on that I had.
That's not a defense to not paying child support, sir. That's not a defense to not paying your child support obligation. All right, I'll look at the, actually, the motion that you filed, Ms. Martin, asked for a judgment for $9,072 from 10/4/2009 through 1/31/2011. 1/31/2011. And you have not received any support this year.
No.
Okay, so
Then
that's-
I'm mistaken, because I thought I looked at the right
11 months.
document last night.
I haven't seen my child for 15 months.
Still has needs.
Stop.
16.
Stop. We're in recess. Thank you. Come back at 1:30.
Thank you, Your Honor.